to Around the 412. We are part of the DK Pittsburgh Sports Podcast Network. I am Tyler, and with me as always is my co-host Smitty. It was an exciting weekend for Pittsburgh fans. We had the draft this weekend. We got the Stanley Cup playoffs coming up. It's an exciting time for Pittsburgh fans. What do you think of it?
Yeah, I said, last week is probably one of my favorite weeks of the year with the draft coming up. But now that that's passed, let's just go right into another one of my favorite weeks with the NHL playoffs kicking off. We know that the Penguins and Rangers will be matching up for sure. That's been, it looked like that was going to be the case for a very long time now. And in fact, it will happen. But we'll talk about that series in a little bit. I think the first thing we want to talk about here is the Steelers. Also, we can mention real quick that the Pirates are 9-12. They're going to have really no part of this show just because of everything else going on. If you are here for Pirates talk, they're 9-12. We'll see you next episode. So with the Steelers, though, I want to talk about the draft. That's going to happen in the next segment, but they didn't really address safety in the draft, something that we thought could happen even with Terrell Edmonds returning on a one-year deal. However, the same night of the draft wrapping up, on Saturday, they signed Damontae Kazee to a one-year deal who was linked to the Steelers. They brought him in for a meeting and everything like that. They officially signed him on Saturday. This is an interesting signing because he's a little bit different than an Edmonds. So like when they had interest in both those guys, it was like, he's more like, I don't want to say he's Tyrann Mathieu, but that's the type of player that he is. He's played both safety spots. He's played nickel corner. So a versatile guy, 12 career interceptions over 5 years. He's started a lot of games for Atlanta. It was really the injuries that hampered him there, but he's always around the ball. I like the signing. I like what it allows them to do because I think you can still have those two high safety looks now, bring Edmonds in the box and play almost like a linebacker in a lot of different packages. So what do you think about the signing?
I think it's great. I mean, your boy Jaquan Brisker was taking a few picks before the Steelers, so that didn't work out. But yeah, they didn't address safety in the draft like a lot of people thought they would, and I think that safety depth behind Edmonds and Fitzpatrick is kind of thin and unproven, I would say, as far as the Steelers' depth goes. And I whenever they signed KZ, I was like, okay, so they're shoring up some depth and some veteran experience back there. And immediately I thought, like you mentioned that he could play nickel corner, is that this could be the replacement for Mike Hilton we were looking for on the defense, and he could play into that role more so than other people have, and maybe a little bit better just because he has the NFL experience already. And I just think it's a really good depth move for the position because it's one of the ones that is still lacking on the Steelers.
Yeah, because I mean, Trey Norwood was actually listed as like a slot corner, so I don't know what his role is going to be next year. I liked what we saw from him, especially for a 7th round guy in 2021, but I'm not sure what his 2022 role looks like. To me, this is bad news for a guy like Karl Joseph. When you talk about battles that are going to happen in camp, because when you look at like the safety depth and corners, like that's also a similar role that Karl Joseph plays is what we're asking KZ probably to come in and do. Yeah. Like Miles Killebrew is obviously very safe. They brought him back on a new contract. He's their best special teams player. And he's more of like he's listed as like a safety, but honestly plays more like a linebacker when he is on the field defensively. So yeah, when you look at like backup safeties, who was really there? I mean, again, Trey Norwood, who was listed as a slot corner, Karl Joseph, who's a hybrid, and now you get like another hybrid guy in Damontae Kazee, who has the highest upside of the guys that we're talking about here, and we've already seen him do it at a high level when healthy. Former 2nd round pick of the Falcons, and like I said, got off to a really good start in Atlanta, but injuries just hampered him. Played last year in Dallas and didn't return there, actually along with another Falcons player, Keanu Neal, who was linked to the Steelers for a little bit of time there as well. So yeah, I like what it gives them from a versatility standpoint. It's going to be interesting to see what packages that he gets used in. But if you're looking for like one guy that this spells bad news for, to me, it's Karl Joseph, who the team did bring back, but I doubt that there's much guaranteed on it. And I would assume, they're going to battle it out in camp, but Damontae Kazee to me is nearly a lock to make this roster.
Yeah, I think like this is an NFL guy, like a veteran guy. And I don't think you're going to bring him in to... I don't want to say that it's not a battle because it's definitely going to be, but I just don't think you're going to bring him in and expect him to not make the roster, unlike Karl Joseph. So I think that you're probably expecting to have packages with KZ in there, and whatever position they put him at, I think that's going to be like the guy that's going to be in there moving forward.
Yeah, I think like you mentioned, like, a Mike Hilton thing. Well, from a like blitzing standpoint, they they like to use Arthur Millette in that role, and that still very well could happen, but you can't ask him to cover. I mean, we saw that last year. So yeah, I mean, in dime looks, I think that he could see the field in dime looks for sure for Kazee. And again, we could see him and Minka playing as two deep safeties and letting Edmonds kind of drop into the box. And in the way that we've seen Edmonds kind of become like a tight end eraser as he's gotten better and progressed throughout his time here in Pittsburgh too. Yeah, it's going to give him a lot of versatility. And we know that Terrell Austin, running the show now as the defensive coordinator in Pittsburgh, he's got the defensive backs background. So, as many defensive backs as you can get in town for him to utilize, the better.
Yeah, I think this gives them a lot of variety of what packages we can see back there. It gives them the freedom to be able to not just be hampered to Fitzpatrick and Edmonds being in their strict roles. They can kind of experiment a little bit with their packages more. Because like I said, to me, I would describe the depth behind some of these DBs as unproven. There are a lot of young guys that do not have a lot of NFL experience, but you're bringing someone in that does. And I just think that's going to be able to help the Steelers better in those situations.
I think, it could honestly even help. We talked about how bad the run defense was last year. And if you can put all three of those guys on the field at the same time and have Edmonds play around the line of scrimmage and maybe help out in run support too, I think that that's another way to stop guys from getting to those second and third levels. If Edmonds, their most short tackler since 2019, is playing around the line of scrimmage. So yeah, I don't see this as a bad signing. Like I really think it's, I haven't seen the numbers on it, but I imagine it's pretty low risk as well. So
yeah, I can't imagine it being a lot of money.
Yeah, I would venture to. I mean, we're paying Edmonds $2.5 million. I think that's fair to probably guess it's around that same range. So we'll see when it comes out. But yeah, I like this a lot because I think that we've already seen the upside, as I mentioned. If not for injuries, I don't think he's in a spot where he's signing just a 1-year prove-it deal at this point.
Yeah.
So, all right, we're gonna take a quick break. When we come back on Around the 412, we're gonna kind of go through the draft that the Steelers just had and how they address the areas they need. New quarterback in town. Same town that he's very familiar with. We'll talk about that pick. We'll talk about all the other picks. This is Around the 412 on the DK Pittsburgh Sports Podcast Network. Welcome back to Around the 412 on the DK Pittsburgh Sports Podcast Network. I'm Smitty. That is Tyler. As promised, let's go through the 2022 Pittsburgh Steelers draft class. Night 1, 20th pick overall. They stick at 20 overall. They do go quarterback, but it's Kenny Pickett out of the University of Pittsburgh, staying put in the 412. Wasn't expected, honestly, by us. We thought Malik Willis. That was all we were hearing. Malik Willis stays on the board until pick 86 for the Tennessee Titans to move up and get him in the 3rd round. Kenny Pickett to the Steelers. Obviously, that was their guy. They zeroed in on him. As Mike Tomlin said, they traveled around the country to end up right back in Pittsburgh, the guy in their own backyard, and Kenny Pickett. And I think that's why, we can talk about this pick a little bit. I had him as my QB3 from the class. That means absolutely nothing to the Pittsburgh Steelers. I actually joked about that in a tweet. Thought that was very funny. But to me, I'm okay with the process of this. And is it going to work out? I don't know. But the fact that they had every quarterback at their disposal from this draft class, they could have taken anyone that they wanted. They were all available at pick number 20 and landed on this guy. I think at this point, all we can do is just trust the process and hopes it works out, right?
Yeah. Honestly, I'm excited about this. I think that they weren't put into an Artie Burns situation where their guy was taken beforehand and they had to panic pick somebody. Like you said, they had the entire quarterback room disposal at their hands, and they could pick whoever they want. And they got their guy, and it came out after the draft, or after the first day at least, that Malik Willis, as opposed to what we thought, was QB3 on their board.
We were right on who was number 2.
We were right on who was number 2. We thought Desmond Ridder was number 2, but Malik Willis was the 3rd quarterback, and Kenny Pickett was always their number 1 guy. And I know they're always going to say, like, after the draft, oh, we didn't think this guy was going to be here, or we're just excited he followed for him. I kind of believe him, though. Like, I don't think that Kevin Colbert was lying when he was saying that. I genuinely think that between maybe it was like the Panthers and the Saints and maybe another team, like, they just didn't think that Kenny Pickett was going to be at number 20, and he was. It was kind of surprising if that was their guy, how long it took for them to get the card in. But I think that if any team, and this is not to say, like, they did not pick him because he went to Pitt. Anybody who thinks that is not the case. There's no homer ability. Pipeline. Yeah, there's no homer ability for the Steelers. I mean, everybody, like James Conner, everybody that thought whenever they picked him it was because he went to Pitt. No, like they do not pick a lot of Pitt guys in their drafts. So that's a non-story. But if anybody was going to know more about Kenny Pickett than any other team in the NFL, it would be the Steelers. They shared the same building with him for 5 years. They got to see how this guy processes the game, how he works, how he studies film, literally everything. They had that at their disposal. And so I think they really studied Kenny Pickett, and what they saw from him is what they want in a franchise guy. And what I noticed, I think that, and we talked about this a little bit on one of our live shows, whether it was ours or Jake's, is that I think that the NFL this year, I mean, they noticed that the quarterback class was lower, obviously, based off where they were taken. But also, to me, with Pickett going first and then Ritter being the second quarterback and not even Willis, is that they were looking for more stability at the position and not just banking on the upside. And I know, like, you can have those situations like Josh Allen. That's a bank on the upside, and it worked out. But in this class, is, I guess, low as it is as in terms of quarterback standards, and especially what we've seen the past few years, teams were really banking on the for sureness, and I think that there's just the stability at the position. And if there was a guy that's the most NFL ready, it was going to be Kenny Pickett, and he's going to have a chance to compete right away. And everybody harping on him and everybody harping on the pick, like, this fan base, to me, when I noticed on Thursday night, is just so spoiled, and they're just so erratic. I feel like immediately it's not the guy that they wanted, and so it's immediately a terrible pick. I can't get into that mindset. The dude hasn't even put on the uniform and played yet. Let it play out. Kenny Pickett might be a really good quarterback, and we just don't know yet. Everybody's expecting him to be just this very generic and bad quarterback. They're saying he doesn't have a high ceiling. Maybe he proves us wrong. The draft community is not always right. Let's be honest. We can evaluate players all we want, but that does not mean we know anything about football. And I'm going to trust that Mike Tomlin, Kevin Colbert, and I assume that others, maybe even like Brandon Hunt, if he gets the GM spot, had a hand in on who they wanted as a quarterback as well. And I am going to trust that they know more about football than I do. And so I'm not going to judge this pick right away. I think it's awesome. I think they got their quarterback. I'm going to trust that they chose the right quarterback, and let's see how it plays out.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those things where people are, they're either going to be proven right or wrong. There's going to be people on both sides of it. Why even put anything out there to be in that position right now without seeing him play a single game? Just, again, the Steelers haven't been in a position to have to draft a franchise quarterback for a very long time. There's no reason to believe that they can't go 1-for-1 on doing it. So let's see this thing play out first. Obviously, we're all rooting for the best things to happen. And at the very least, I don't know how you can argue about how cool of a story it is that he just gets to stay in Pittsburgh. Moving on to their second selection, going to night 2. This is one that, a lot of people were saying due to red flags, he would be off a lot of teams' boards. We felt like Pittsburgh was not going to be one of those teams with how much time that they spent with this guy. They checked all the boxes, right? Pro day, dinner, informal meeting, formal meeting, met with him as many times as they possibly could leading up to the draft. George Pickens, the wide receiver out of Georgia, is the selection at 52. They did have the opportunity. They had their choice there between him or Sky Moore. They go for Pickens. From just an upside standpoint, right on the football field, this was the last guy that I felt like could blossom into a wide receiver 1. All the traits are there on the football field. So obviously love that. He does look like an AFC North wide receiver. If you are a fan of the Steelers or any other AFC North team, you know what I mean when I'm saying that. He's got that toughness in him for sure. I'm not going to say he's got that dog in him because that was just a running joke throughout the draft week. But no, hard not to like this selection from a football standpoint. If everything off the field, gets cleaned up and they rein him in here in Pittsburgh, what a landing spot too, obviously, with Tomlin and just the room that we have here, the culture that we have here in Pittsburgh. So just from a football standpoint, hard to be upset with this pick.
No, I thought it was great. And after the first top 5-ish wide receivers in the draft, which is pretty much a consensus, I thought.
Oh, I had him as my 5.
Oh, you had him as your, so do you have Burks?
I'm not a Treylon Burks guy.
Okay. Yeah. So well, I'll say for the majority of people, I feel like the majority of people had those as the top 5. I mean, George Pickens, I think you could have him in the same range of George Pickens, Jahan Dotson, Sky Moore. They were all who's going to be the next wide receiver taken. Jahan Dotson ended up going in the first round, but I think George Pickens, skill-wise, is just as good as those receivers, if not better. And I think that it gives the luxury for the Steelers, and something that we've talked about a little bit is what is Chase Claypool going to be for the Steelers? Should he move in to be a big slot? Is he better suited there than on the outside based off what we've seen so far? I think that the George Pickens gives you the flexibility that if you want to test that out and experiment that, the Steelers can do so. And I think that, this is just a really good pick. I feel like the Steelers are they're always good at finding receivers places, but they're not always known for taking the receivers that are those are already really good guys.
This is the highest pedigree receiver they've taken in a long time.
That's what I mean. This guy is proven already. He was one of the highest graded. I don't care about PFF ever, but whenever it's good for the draft picks, then I care about it. So he's one of the highest graded receivers for PFF since 2018. I'm ecstatic about this pick, and the quote unquote all off field issues. I mean, what a better team? Name a better team to go to than I feel like the Steelers and Mike Tomlin for him to figure that out. I feel like he's going to the right team in the right situation, and I think this is going to be great for the offense.
Yeah, if they're comfortable with it, why shouldn't we be? They spent, like I said, as much time with him as anybody. Moving on to round 3, you actually had this guy going to the Steelers. But
I did.
A pick earlier.
I got to claim my W on that one. It was the wrong pick, but I got the right guy, so I will count that as a win.
Defensive lineman DeMartin Leal comes to Pittsburgh at pick 84. Again, also, I think we should point out the Steelers just stayed put with all their picks. They just selected all their picks, didn't move up or down, just stayed where they were with their selections. But DeMartin Leal comes to Pittsburgh. This is definitely a pick that they needed, right? You were kind of harping on this for a couple of weeks leading up to the draft. They need some replenishment along that defensive line. Even if you get Stephon Tuitt back, even if you get Alualu back, even close to what he is, this very well could be his last year in the league. We don't know the Tuitt situation. Cam Hayward still playing at a high level, but he's getting up there in age. And then you have complementary pieces like Chris Wormley filled in nicely last year. I like what Monty Adams came in and did, but they needed something more there. They needed a building block, next in line foundational piece. And that's what DeMartin Leal's upside definitely is. You can move him around along that defensive line. Hard to dislike this pick as well. And I think that the value was definitely there. I assume he was just about the highest. They talk about how they have their board, right? It's just take the best player that's available when it gets to that point. I would assume that they would have been comfortable taking him even at 52, let alone him falling to 84. And again, when you just talk about what better landing spot, when you got Dunbar, the defensive line coach, who's been great, when you have Cam Hayward to teach him, when you have Alualu for at least one more year and hopefully Tuitt coming back too, this is a prime landing spot for this guy.
Yeah, I thought it was great. And the big thing was, and why I kept harping on this as a sneaky need for the Steelers in this defensive line, is that these guys aren't getting any younger. I mean, Cam Hayward is getting up there in age. He's not going to be able to keep the level of play he's at forever. Stephon Tuitt, we hope he comes back and he plays well, but that's still a question up in the air. Tyson Alualu, like you said, this could be his last year. I think this was a definite need for the Steelers. And what they got in DeMartin Leal, I thought is great. He's kind of like that hybrid defensive lineman where he's not quite big enough to be a traditional defensive tackle, but he's also not lean enough to be a normal edge rusher. But whenever you watch this guy, you can already tell that he is superb at the pass rush. He's got multiple moves to get to the quarterback. And I think the only thing that they need to figure out is where they want to play him. If they want to play him at a traditional defensive lineman, he just needs to put on a little bit of muscle, put on a little bit of weight. And that way he can really be strong in those trenches. But I mean, that's really for the run defense. I think as far as the pass rush goes, he's already there. Watching his tape is awesome. He's just got so a whole catalog of moves that he can use, and I think it's really versatile. And I'm thinking like you've got when you have TJ, Alex Highsmith, Cam Hayward, and then you throw in like DeMartin Leal in there passing or rushing the quarterback, it's going to be very lethal for those offensive lines.
Yeah, what's interesting, man, is you mentioned like the array of pass rush moves that he has, and you would like to see him probably put on about 10 pounds, but he actually was playing at the weight that you would like to have him be at in the past. He actually dropped some weight, so it shouldn't be an issue for him to be able to get back up there and still have that quick twitch that you need him to have. But what was interesting is watching him, Derek Bell pointed this out as well when we were doing like a pre-draft show. This dude, some of the moves that he pulls out while like rushing from the interior, he'll pull out like a Brian Burns spin move, which you don't see anybody do, let alone in the interior of the defensive line. So yeah, I mean, the upside with this guy is massive. You know, I'm not going to go out on a limb and like start throwing out these projections of Pro Bowls and all pros and whatever. But I think that just from like a talent standpoint, the value was way too good at 84. This pick made way too much sense. And had they made it a 52, I don't think anybody's really questioning it because
that's where I had it.
Was, like you said, a sneaky need.
Yeah, that's where I had it was 52, and he was one of those guys that we were kind of watching on the board with those like Travis Jones, who unfortunately went to the Ravens, Nakobe Dean, like Leo Chenal, like there was multiple guys that we were looking on the board like how are they falling this far, and so to be able to get him at 84, like you said, the value I think is insane for this pick.
Yeah, I think if Pickens isn't there at 52, it makes things really interesting for what could have happened. However, how about this? We get to day 3, round 4. We're looking like, okay, this pick's going to be like defensive back, maybe linebacker. They take a project tackle or something like that. They double dip at wide receiver, and I think this is another case where the value was just too good. I had this guy as a top 75 player in this class, and I probably would have had him higher if he wasn't 5'8". Calvin Austin III out of Memphis. What an unreal. I mean, this guy isn't just a speedster. I don't want to like even start off by saying that because he's a route technician. Like he's not just a guy that you just tell, hey, run straight and we'll throw you the ball, because he's a good enough route runner. He creates his own space. He's got a diverse enough route tree that he deserves more than just being called like that track star speed. What he did at Memphis was unreal. And, you know, I think that like the size limitations will be interesting to see how in the NFL, like, you know, the Steelers and Matt Canada are able to utilize him and get him these mismatches in space. But man, you get the ball in his hands and they finally have a home run hitter on offense, which you kind of hoped like you were going to get from like an Anthony McFarland, but now at the wide receiver position. And hopefully you actually get this from this guy instead of what we've not seen from Anthony McFarland. But we've been, you know, pounding the table just as you were for like defensive line help. We've been pounding the table for some explosiveness on offense, and between Pickens and Calvin Austin, they're on the right track.
Yeah, I texted you right after this pick, and I was like, well, it's glad to know that someone your height could play in the NFL.
Yeah.
But yeah, I thought this was a great pick. I did not see them really double dipping at wide receiver, even though part of me was hoping that they would based off who we were there. Like we were seeing like Calvin Austin, who they ended up picking, Khalil Shakur, multiple guys that we really liked and thought were like second, third round guys falling into the day 3. I think this is a really good pick. Like you said, he's not just the speed guy, and that's all he's known for. His route running is really superb. Some of the stuff he did at the Senior Bowl was great. He was embarrassing the DBs. I think especially when it gets into those like red zone offenses, he's very hard to like keep up with as a DB where he's going. He's got that just like quick twitch, agile moves that it gets confusing and the DBs can't really keep up. So he's not just valued as that track speed guy. He's got those route running abilities as well. And also to mention on this track speed, he is also a pretty good returner in college as well. So maybe the Steelers want to utilize that. Well, I mean, I know they signed Gunner, but if you got a guy that can run a 4.3, maybe you try to utilize that. My only question is like, what are we going to like packages wise, or where are we going to see this guy? Is he going to be a slot receiver? Are they going to put him on the outside, 4 receivers, the sets? I mean, the Steelers are like really getting a quite a bit of possibilities, at least with packages for their receivers.
Yeah, for anybody that, you know, had the excuses last year for Matt Canada, you're not going to have them this year because the weapons that we have at his disposal now. Yeah, I mean, Calvin Austin is a guy that we've seen play on the outside. Can he still succeed at that level or on the outside in the NFL? I don't know, but it's not like he had just slot limitations at Memphis. So be interesting to see how he's utilized. And again, Matt Canada, sorry pal, but the expectations they're way up this year with his offense.
I think my only wondering if for the outside is, can Calvin Austin maybe put on like 5 or 10 pounds and kind of get a little more physical on the outside? Because I think that's something that NFL DBs are going to be towards him that he didn't see in college in the AAC.
Yeah. And then, kind of rounding out here, don't want to spend a ton of time on these other picks, but so Connor Hayward, obviously another brother set here in Pittsburgh, but he wasn't drafted just because he was Cam Hayward's brother. Like Mel Kiper Jr., for whatever you want to think of him and his draft evaluations and stuff like that, he had this guy as a 4th round. He would take him in the 4th round. I mean, tight end, H-back, fullback, obviously the special teams value. This guy can run routes. He's got very light feet for his position and the role that he plays. I mean, you can send him downfield. What he does with the ball in his hands, he's very. We
saw it against Pitt in the
we saw it against
Sugar
Pitt.
Bowl.
So basically, what I'm getting at is I want to put people's minds to rest here. This guy was not just drafted because he's Cam Hayward's brother. This guy can play football, and I keep saying it a lot, but like he looks like a Pittsburgh Steeler and he plays like a Pittsburgh Steeler.
Hey, I mean, the biggest thing to me whenever I saw this had nothing to do with Cam Hayward. The biggest thing for this draft pick is that we can get Derek Watt off of this team. and it's nothing against Derek Watt. Maybe they do end up keeping both of them, but for $3.5 million, Derek Watt is not in the offense enough. They don't utilize the fullback position. And I don't think a $3.5 million player should only be on special teams.
He definitely ain't getting on the offense now with adding the weapons that we have. You've
exactly. So I don't see. We add one brother duo so we can split up another one, because I just don't see the value in keeping Derek Watt anymore at the price tag he's at. He only plays special teams. We went through his snap counts before on the show. They're very minimal on the offense. The Steelers' offense does not utilize the fullback position whatsoever, and $3.5 million for a special teams player, you're going to get close to league minimum for Connor Hayward to do the exact same thing. So I that was my initial reaction, is like Derek Watt might be gone this coming fall off the Steelers.
Yeah. And then last couple picks, we can kind of, I feel like, bunch these two in together. They do a linebacker, Mark Robinson out of Ole Miss, and then they add another quarterback, which makes sense considering they said they wanted to go into camp with 4. Probably spent a draft pick on him because they were worried about him being a priority UDFA signing for another team. So Chris, and if I'm saying this wrong, I apologize. Somebody can correct us. This is how Tyler was hearing it on YouTube. Chris Oladokun, quarterback, South Dakota State. Is that right?
Oladokun.
Chris Oladokun, South Dakota State Jackrabbits. Yeah, well, it's funny because if you look up the pronunciation, and I was listening to it, it says it one way, the way that it was in the highlights.
But I was listening to the announcer say it.
You were listening to an announcer say it. So yeah, this might be a Connor Sherry situation.
Maybe.
But yeah. They wanted to go into camp with 4 quarterbacks. This allows them to do so. But this Mark Robinson one is interesting because they already have a ton of linebackers. From everything that honestly, I'll be upfront with you. This is not a guy that I spent a ton of time on pre-draft or anything like that. From what I've seen on him, though, very old school linebacker, that just hard-hitting, thumping type, not, necessarily a great athlete, but if you're looking for like almost like a Vince Williams type or something like that, I guess he kind of fits that mold. Could probably play special teams, but and that's probably what you're asking for when you get into like the 6th, 7th round, is guys that contribute on special teams. But when you're adding another linebacker to an already pretty crowded room, not necessarily of guys that are starter capable, but you talk about like the Marcus Allens, the Ulysses Gilberts, the Robert Spillanes, not great news when they're adding another linebacker.
No, and I feel like if they want to keep this guy as a linebacker, not just a special teamer, and try to develop him, he is kind of a project linebacker because he did play running back before playing just this one season as a linebacker his senior year at Ole Miss. And so I do think that he's a project. He's never played linebacker in college before that. So they obviously liked what they saw enough to be able to take him in the 7th round. And he'll probably majority play special teams, but maybe they saw some traits and some upside to this guy that they think they might be able to develop out of him.
Yeah, now that you're actually saying that, I could see them just like stashing him on the practice squad basically for an entire year. Like, unless there's some injury where he would need to be called up to be active on game days. If he's that much of a project, he probably won't even see the field in year 1.
Yeah, because I saw it after we drafted him. He only played the 1 year as linebacker. He was a running back before that.
And then what do we make of this other pick? Because like I said, we knew that they wanted to go into camp with 4 quarterbacks and probably just wanted to draft the guy, spend their last pick on him so they didn't have to compete in UDFA for him.
To me, I think this is basically what you were saying. They needed the 4 quarterbacks going into camp, but if he doesn't make the squad, which, I mean, there's a good chance he doesn't, this could be a practice squad quarterback. But maybe the Steelers could be hoping, or maybe they're not hoping, but they're giving the possibility that maybe Mason Rudolph is not on the Steelers this coming fall, and they save a little cash money on there. I don't really see. I mean, with the signing of Mitchell Trubisky and drafting Kenny Pickett in the first round, I just don't see a way that Mason Rudolph is anything higher than QB3 this coming fall. So maybe they're bringing in another guy to try to compete for that QB3 spot. I mean, obviously they drafted him. But at the worst, I think this guy is going to be on the practice squad. And at the best, he could be QB3, and we could see Mason Rudolph heading out of Pittsburgh.
Yeah, I mean, they brought him in for a top 30 visit, too. So, like, they've had their eyes on him even pre-draft. I could see a scenario where they're looking to recoup, like, an additional day 3 pick next year or something in the draft by trading Mason to a QB-needy team and saving that $3 million.
Mm-hmm.
So that's kind of how I'm looking at it. But again, you could be very well right where this is like their practice squad quarterback. So
I think that's at the very least.
Yeah. All right. We're going to take another break. When we come back, Pens Rangers, like we said, is going to happen for sure in round 1. We will talk about that. This is Around the 412 on the DK Pittsburgh Sports Podcast Network. And welcome back to Around the 412 on the DK Pittsburgh Sports Podcast Network. I'm Smitty. That is Tyler. Let's wrap up the show talking about some Penguins playoff hockey right around the corner with the playoffs kicking off tonight. If you're watching, listening to this on Monday when it comes out. Tomorrow for the Penguins up in the Big Apple going against the New York Rangers in round 1. Definitely not the ideal situation, right, if you are a Penguins fan, because of the way that Shesterkin has played all year against everybody, and specifically the way that the Rangers have handled us as of late. We know playoff hockey is a different animal. Maybe that will be the difference. The Penguins have been kind of locked into a playoff spot, as pretty much the entire Eastern Conference has been for a while. So hopefully the Pens can kick it into high gear. They did have a pretty solid performance to wrap up the season against Columbus on Friday. So, maybe they are going to, ride that momentum. We know that they're not going to have Tristan Jarry or Jason Zucker to open up this playoff series. Will they return at some point? Hopefully. Are they going to play enough games to give those guys a chance to return? Hopefully. The one question that I have for you when it comes to the lineup, though, before we get into like this series at all, they called up Drew O'Connor. However, during line rushes and stuff for the first practice up here, it was still Kasperi Kapanen that was in that spot that we thought that we might see Drew O'Connor in.
Yeah, to me, what's the point in that case? I guess if you want him up here as a security blanket for the playoffs in case somebody gets hurt, but I'm looking at the lines right now. That third line is hideous. McGinn, Carter, and Kapanen, I just envision them getting hemmed in their zone the entire time. I don't see any upside to that line. And Kapanen himself, I don't know why he was a healthy scratch one game for Boyle, and then now he's back in. And I mean, Boyle's playing because Zucker's out now, but I would just keep Kapanen out. I don't see any upside whatsoever to his game and what he will bring in the playoffs. It just seems like they're going to get hemmed into their defensive zone every single time they're on the ice. And I don't think that's a good line at all. And if
it's a weird combination,
very, very blunt. It's not a good line whatsoever. I mean, Jeff Carter has been in a slump for really just the second half of the season. And Kapanen's been in a slump since the whole season. I just envision this ending very badly for that line.
Kapanen's been in a slump since the 2021 playoff series versus the Islanders. That's basically the best way to put it. It's just a weird combination because, like you said, it just seems they seem destined to just spend their entire shifts in their defensive end because who's breaking that puck out? Who's bringing like the real defensive presence? Like Brock McGinn is killing penalties for the team, and he's supposed to be like a defensive-minded forward. I don't know if you've seen the numbers on him this year, but he has not done that at a very high level. So I don't really trust him to be that defensive presence for that. And line.
On that third line, Rodriguez was practicing on the fourth line today. If you're at least going to have a very unproductive offensive line, you might as well put Rodriguez on there to hope he gets some defense on that line as well.
Yeah. That's true. I mean, I don't get it. I don't know why you wouldn't have, I like Danton Heinen playing in the top six, but at least he could provide some like defensive presence to that third line. I don't know. I don't know what they're doing, but yeah, I would throw Drew O'Connor in there for Kasperi Kapanen at the very least. And I probably would have, McGinn playing down with Bluder still. It's interesting to how Mike Sullivan's going to orchestrate this whole thing, but assuming that it stays the way that it looked for line rushes today. Yeah, I don't love the way that they're going into the series.
Even looking at some other stuff, Raquel is still with Malkin, which we've seen is just not good on the ice. They play, I don't want to say they play similar enough, but it's the case where Raquel likes to have the puck, but Malkin also likes to have the puck. They don't play well together. We've seen that. Letang is back with Dumoulin, which I honestly would have preferred if Dumoulin stayed away from Letang. I don't think that Dumoulin has played well at all this second half of the season, or basically the majority of the season. There's just lineup decisions where I'm like, what are they actually thinking? I feel like it's simple. It's right there. Read a Danny Shirey article, Sullivan, and figure out how to adjust your lineup accordingly.
He doesn't read Danny Shirey's articles, and it shows.
Yeah. I just feel like the lineup decisions are not putting your team in the best situation to win the series.
Yeah, and I get, Mike Sullivan has accomplished so much in his time here in Pittsburgh. It's also pretty insane to think he's the second longest tenured head coach in the NHL already. But that just goes to show you the turnover that happens across the league. But, I still think that it's fair enough to question some things. Like, he's not perfect. He'll admit that. I'm sure he would say that. But, the buttons that he's pushing right now,
it's kind of like one of those things that it's like, obviously Mike Sullivan knows more about hockey than we ever will. But
he's forgotten more than we ever will.
But we've seen it the entire season, and I feel like when you see it over and over and over again in multiple games, it's not just whether he knows hockey more than us. I mean, we can see how bad those lines are performing. It's on the ice. It's in the advanced stats. It's there.
Yeah, and I also I do think the Pens are a good team, but I also think it's fair to question if they even have if they have the horses, if he has the talent at his disposal to even if you optimize this lineup and get the most out of it possible, if they even still are one of the top contenders. I know most people don't want to hear that, but
I mean, based off the bottom six, you could have easily taken out pretty much everybody in that bottom six outside of maybe Bluger, who was injured for the majority of the second half of the season. And you could have put in Radim Zahorna, Anthony Angelo, Valtteri Puustinen, Drew O'Connor, who's up here now, and heck, maybe even Alex Nylander. And you probably could have gotten at least the same production that you would have gotten the majority of this season on that bottom six.
Yeah. So what's interesting, though, talking about all this, like bringing it back to the series now against the Rangers, Dom Luchesne of The Athletic put together, his playoff preview stuff, and it shows like series probability, how many games it could go, and based off all the information that he always puts out. Penguins, 56% chance to 44% chance for the Rangers are the expected team to win this series. Most common would be Penguins in 6 games.
That's surprising to me. I'll be honest. And majority of that has to do with, the Penguins play as of late, but also it has to do with the fact that we're playing Igor Shesterkin, who will probably win the Vezina Trophy. I feel like there's a chance that the Penguins could get goalied. Now, maybe he is predicting that maybe Shesterkin doesn't have the playoff experience along with that whole Rangers squad for the most part, and they might crumble in the spotlight. But I feel that that might be overhyped. I feel like the they've really dominated the Penguins the last 3 times they played them, and I don't really see it being like, if I'm picking a favorite, I think the Rangers should be favored in this series.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, I mean, it's two teams that are really trending in the opposite direction, because I know that the talk most of the year was the Rangers are a pretty average team without Shesterkin playing the way that he was and still is. But I think that, as a whole, the Rangers have played a lot better as of late. We've seen the Penguins be about a 500 team over the last 2 months. So to me, it's two teams that are trending in very opposite directions. But when the bright lights come on in the playoffs, how's that going to change? We don't know. Igor Shesterkin does not have much of a body of work here in the playoffs, so it'll be interesting to see how he responds. I guess the same thing could really be said about Casey DeSmith, though, because he hasn't been called upon in the playoffs much either. So,
and listen, I will never doubt that the Penguins, if they're playing their best, can beat any team in the NHL. We've seen that multiple times throughout the years, and even this season, they've competed and beat some really good teams. But like you said, it's just the way that they're trending and the way the lineup is shaking up, and the fact that we have Casey DeSmith having to be our starting goalie and not Tristan Jarry. Maybe we see, I know Sullivan said that they're going to miss at least a few games of this series, a couple games. Maybe if we get to game 4, hopefully, and we don't get swept. If we get to make it to game 4, maybe game 5, we get to see Zucker or Jarry, probably Zucker before Jarry come back and get into the lineup. But I mean, we got to make it there. The Penguins have to perform. I mean, they gotta flip a switch. It's playoff time. You cannot perform like you have been the past month. You got to know what it is. And I feel like Sidney Crosby and Letang, Malkin, they'll probably try to get the guys ready. I just hope the team's ready. I know they will be, but I hope the team as a whole is ready to face what's in front of them.
Well, we'll get answers rather quick here. By the way, the playoffs I feel like this came out of nowhere, because all of a sudden we're talking about, and I think it's kind of the way that it lined up with the NFL draft. It's just bam, NHL playoffs are here. But by the time that we have our next episode, we'll already know the results of the first 3 games. So we'll see how those first 3
Do we want to give a series prediction for the Penguins since it hasn't started yet?
I'm going to go Rangers in 7. Unfortunately, I do think that the Penguins I think that they play better in this series than what we've seen from them over the course of the last 2 months. I think it comes down to goaltending, especially when you're talking about, a series that goes 7 games. I think Shesterkin could steal 2, right off the bat. So, I'll say Rangers in 7, but again, I don't think that it's going to be a case where the Penguins play poorly, but not getting bounced in the first round. I know that that's going to come with questions. So.
Unfortunately, I'm with you as well, but I'm going to say Rangers in 6. I see glimpses of 2015 over again. I know the Penguins lost in 5 that series, but I mean, I feel like they're going to lose a lot of 1-goal games. They're going to get goalied to me. I think Shesterkin is just going to play really well, and it's not that the Penguins are going to play bad. They might only give up 1 or 2 goals a game, but I feel like they're just going to have a hard time scoring at the way they're playing, and I just don't really see them being able to get out of this series.
Yeah, hopefully at the very least we see their mindset change, because the Penguins have talked about this too, and I think everybody kind of pointed out the last time we saw the Rangers. It's they're almost scared to shoot at him. They just won't fire the puck towards the net because of how good he is. Okay, well, you're definitely not going to score on him if you're not shooting the puck. Let's get that.
You miss 100% of the shots you don't take.
But yeah, hopefully just from a mindset standpoint,
Michael Scott,
they actually just realize that they do need to, we keep hearing them talk about simplifying things. That's great to talk about it. Let's actually see them do it. So I like the Rangers in this series in 7 games, but I don't think it's going to be the Penguins looking bad like we saw them in the bubble, or when they get swept by the Islanders. I think it'll be more not with how the goaltending was last year, but pretty similar to last year's series against the Islanders.
Yeah, and let me say, I've said this before, even if it was the Rangers, the Panthers, Carolina, whoever it ended up being, I don't think losing in the first round, let me preface, as long as they're competitive, I don't think losing in the first round this year, especially in the Eastern Conference, is as demoralizing as it would have been in previous years. The Eastern Conference is just so good this year that I think no matter who they would have played, losing in the first round, unless you just absolutely look terrible, is not the end of the world for the Penguins. It's just it's going to be a reality for 4 of the 8 Eastern Conference teams. The Penguins might be one of them.
the far superior conference, at least this year. But yeah, we will see how those first 3 games play out, and we'll get to talk about them next week on the show. Other than that, I don't think that we have anything else. You guys in the comments can let us know what you think about the Steelers draft haul, how you think that this series goes between the Pens and Rangers, and all that other good stuff. Other than that, for Smitty, for Tyler, this is Around the 412 on the DK Pittsburgh Sports Podcast Network. We'll talk to you guys next week. Until then.